Okay. Hello. As the days get colder and the nights draw in, I start to think about long chats in front of a fire with a lovely, lovely libation. Friends, a fire, and a fine wine. There is no better way to spend a winter's night. Today's fireside chat is about the strong links between ethics and loyalty and how data is the glue that binds the two together in a marketing context, obviously. Again, no better way to spend a winter's night than talking about data and ethics. Sarcasm intended. I'm your moderator, Skip Federa, and I'm a fractional CMO and board advisor. Fractional is just a rebrand of part time. I work with B2B tech companies that are transitioning from startup to scale up. They need a marketing leader to come in and help set the strategy. But unlike a consultant, I stay on to work with the team to execute and optimize that strategy. It allows brands to spend money on their marketing rather than their marketer. Now, if you bear with me a second while I share the slides, the intro slides. Right. Now, if you saw my promo for this session, you were a witness to one of my favorite rants. Ipsos Mori runs a global survey each year where it asks people whether they trust certain professions to tell the truth. And advertising execs were only added about 5 years ago, but we have never, ever been better than second to last. In that 1 year, we were able to just scrape in above politicians. The most recent report published for the UK in November of last year has us down at a paltry 13% of consumers who trust us to tell the truth. Now, we're keeping good company with government ministers and politicians in general. And interestingly, in this year's report, estate agents made a big jump up. But I suspect that's more a function of the pandemic than any real change in their profession. Without going through it all again, we have no one to blame but ourselves, I think. As a profession, we routinely violate consumers' trust by following a strategy of doing things we can, not the things we should. Now, I suspect that because you're here, you don't take that approach, and that we are very quickly going to be preaching to the choir. As I was getting ready for this session the other day, I started thinking a lot about trust. Our ethical behavior establishes trust with our customers and our consumers, and that trust is demonstrated through loyalty, but trust is a very funny thing. I was thinking about it. We recently had a builder in, and if you need a builder or a cleaner, you have them come to your house and they poke around for about a half an hour and you assume they're sizing up the job, when in reality, they could be casing the joint, right? At the end of the half hour, they give you a price, it seems fair, and you hand over the keys to your house. Now, sure, you may call a couple of complete strangers for references, but in reality, what good is that? No self-respecting thief is going to give you the number of someone who's going to rat them out, right? And you wouldn't normally hand out the keys to your house, but here you are after just 30 minutes thinking, oh yeah, this person is the best cleaner ever, and I can trust them in my house with all of my stuff alone. And then the next thing you know, as you get a little bit older, you have a childminder that comes around to your house, and now you've handed over your keys and your child. Again, half-hour meeting. And in a 2009 article for HBR, Professor Roderick Kramer looked at a whole bunch of research that went into trust in humans and trust. And what he concluded was that humans are trusting by their very nature. Think about some video you've seen of a baby giraffe or horse or water buffalo. They're born and 30 seconds later, they're wobbly, but they're up on their feet. They are ready to go. Now, because our brains are much bigger, humans are born physically immature. We have to rely on someone to take care of us, and that person usually does. We have to trust to survive. So when we survive, we tend to trust. So how can marketers do a better job and engender trust? Well, that's what we're here to find out. So I've got some theories and some questions that I'm going to put to our panel, as I'm sure you do as well. So please ask any questions that you have using the Q&A tab on the right-hand side of your screen, and feel free to use the chat for everything else, including providing some feedback at the end. We'd really appreciate that. Before we go any further, we should take a moment to thank our sponsors. Today's session is produced by Holistic Email Marketing and brought to you by Validity. For over 20 years, tens of thousands of organizations throughout the world have relied on Validity solutions to target, contact, engage, and keep customers using trustworthy data as a key advantage. Validity's flagship products, Demand Tools, Bright Verify, Everest, and Grid Buddy Cloud are all highly rated solutions for CRM data management, email address verification, inbox deliverability, and avoiding the spam folder, as well as Grid CRM applications. These solutions deliver smarter campaigns, more qualified leads, more productive sales, and ultimately faster growth. So for more information, visit validity.com, and you can also check them out on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter. Also, our friends at Holistic Email Marketing have offered up a prize. One of you will win a Kindle copy of Kath Pay's best-selling book, Holistic Email Marketing, a practical philosophy to revolutionize your business and delight your customers. Now, I am really excited about this presentation, about this session, so I want to get this conversation going. So fill your glass, pull up your chair, settle down next to the fire as we talk with best-selling author and award-winning thought leader, Kath Pay of Holistic Email Marketing, digital storyteller and vice president of customer engagement at Validity, Guy Hansen, lead generation and social media marketing expert, Lauren Rooney, who is also the digital marketing manager at The Loyalty Co. And also with us from The Loyalty Co. is CEO Adam Perslow. Okay, why don't each of you, while people are getting their questions in the Q&A tab, why don't each of you introduce yourselves? Lauren, let's start with you.
Hi everyone, I'm Lauren. As Skip said, I'm a digital marketing manager at The Loyalty Co. We provide clients with a number of digital services, but primarily we like to focus on doing a good job of email marketing and comms for our clients.
Cool. Adam?
Hi everyone. As Skip said, I'm CEO of The Loyalty Co. Many years experience around loyalty across the hospitality sector. Decided to build this business a number of years ago to try and offer services to other industries as well as other businesses within the hospitality sector. So primary focus is loyalty, working alongside Lauren when it comes to digital.
Excellent. Guy, let's go with you.
Hey everyone, I'm Guy, and in terms of experience, I think I've been in the world of email for almost exactly 20 years now, so I reckon more than a few of these grey hairs have come from working with email, but in a good kind of way. And in fact, thinking about it, I've known Skip and Kath for a large part of that email career as well. We go back a good way now. Outside of Validity, I've also had a long-term involvement with the DMA, the Data and Marketing Association, and I currently sit on the email council there, and I lead the working party which produces all the email council research for the DMA, 3 sort of benchmark reports each year, and then a variety of thought leadership that goes hand in hand with that.
Kath, I'm not sure, but I kind of think the guy may have just implied that his gray hair was caused by you and I. So I don't know for sure. But for those who don't know you, Kath, why don't you tell us who you are?
So I'm Kath Pay, CEO of Holistic Email Marketing. We're a boutique consultancy focusing on email, but with the holistic approach, and author of the book that Skip had shown up beforehand. And I guess I'm really excited about today because there you go, there's the book, and I've got everyone here today because Validity and Holistic have got a joint client, which is the Loyalty Co. And we're working with one of their clients, which is individual restaurants. I know it's complicated, but so we've got a lovely working team here together, and we've got some really exciting things to be talking about. So yes, so it's kind of like, I guess, I've got one of my clients here, which is nice.
Yeah, excellent. And I know we want to get into some real detail around that relationship and how the three of you work together and what really cool things you've been doing. But just as kind of a way to start as a scene setter, my rant notwithstanding, why is it that customers don't generally trust marketers? And well, let's start there.
So I think from my perspective and my background, if you like, of working in a big agency, all I've seen from brands is, that one set mind of just sell, and, irrelevant of the customer and how it's perceived from their point of view. For them, they've got to manage their top line, and it's just sell product. So I think from the work that we're doing is taking into consideration that there is a person at the other end of that data, and how that information is received. And obviously long term, the whole point is that, you know, we have a returning customer. So, you know, the reason why I feel like a lot of audiences and mailing lists don't trust marketers is because they tell you what you want rather than asking you the question. And rather involving you in a two-way communication, they're telling you exactly what you want, rather than actually, for our clients, we'll say, you know, for example, we'll take a product and explain why it's a great product, but you know, then it's up to the customer whether they purchase that product. And historically, what I've seen is, you know, emails, and especially sales emails, are so single-minded in that respect, and they just want to focus on that sale and that aspect of ramming it down the customer's neck.
Yeah.
Well, and that's a great. Sorry, Kat. I was just going to say that's a great point for anybody out there who has a teenager. That's why teenagers don't trust parents, right? Because we tell them what they want, we tell them what they should do, and don't involve them in the two-way conversation. I think that's a great point. Sorry, Kath, I stepped on you there.
No, that's fine. I was just going to say, you know, picking up from what Lauren was saying, yes, we marketers tend to be too brand-centric, thinking about our needs, our wants, and not customer-centric enough, right? And that shows in the consumer surveys that come out all the time, where the consumer's saying, listen, guys, I'm okay with you having my data, provided you use it to help me, right? So most of the brands are out there going, we want your data, we want your data, we want your data. And the consumers are going, yeah, but how are you using that to help me? They're using it for product research, maybe, because, you know, but what's that for? Is that for the user, or is that for making more revenue, you know? So it's kind of like, I think we just need to be more transparent, and we need to be more helpful in our approach. And that is happening. It's most definitely happening. You know, we're now very much talking about things like the customer experience, and we're becoming more customer centric.
That's a great point that Kath makes. And since you mentioned the research that you help produce and sponsor, you're going to have this stat to hand more readily than I am. But, you know, for the what is it? Got to be the 10th year in a row, consumers rate email as their preferred channel.
The magic number is 72%.
72%.
And yeah, I'm glad you raised that. It's one of my favorite stats. I think, yeah, it is highly rated as a preferred channel for receiving marketing communications. And I think, you know, some of the factors that drive that are high scores for both trust and for relevance. And I think that's important because as you asked your question, you know, I was thinking there's probably like an analogy between marketers and politicians. I think, you know, they have the sort of same challenge to deal with, because the default setting from the general public is that anything that comes out of their mouths is just this like massively hyped hyperbole. And I think, you know, so I think, yeah, at least to be associated with a channel where there is significantly higher ratings in terms of trust and relevance is comforting.
I think you touched on a really interesting point there. I think clearly there's a disconnect, right? Consumers are saying they want email, they trust email, that's the channel they want to use, and then they say, sort of in the same breath, but we don't trust marketers. And I'm wondering if the question is not asked well, right? If I just say, do you trust marketers? No. But obviously they trust marketers from brands they trust, which leads us nicely kind of into my next question. So Adam, you know, in the intro I said, actually I butchered this in the intro, so I'm going to try to say it better this time. Ethical behavior establishes trust with our customers, and that trust is demonstrated through loyalty.
Yep.
So when we were prepping for today's session, you had some brilliant examples of how your loyalty to some brands paid off for you as a customer.
Yeah.
Can you talk about those?
Absolutely. And it does tie in quite a lot with what Cass just discussed, and Guy as well. But I name a couple of loyalty schemes that I absolutely love. And one of them is Hilton. And I always get drawn back to Hilton. But we've covered Kath's point and Guy's point on what do we do with the data, and it's got to be useful, it's got to be informative, and it's got to be there's a reason for having it. So I think of my favorite email, which comes monthly from the Hilton, and it is how many times I've stayed, how many points I've got, what my tier level is. And every year they send me a really beautiful email that tells me how many countries I've visited and how many hotels I've stayed in and how many nights I've done, and also what I can do with my points. Something like that is an amazing set of data and shows that they really have an awful lot of data on me. But when I look at it, I don't get worried about it. I'm not particularly bothered about the fact there's all this data held on me, because they're doing something that's informative, that is useful for me. And I always use this example. And when I check into a Hilton, I always stay in a Hilton. It's nice that they know where I've been before, because they're using that to engage me as a customer, and they're using that to give me better service. So, Mr. Perslow, how was your stay in the States? That is amazing. They've got the information at their fingertips. It's worrying. And I think if that wasn't said in such a way, you'd wonder why they had the information. If they emailed me and went, "We know you went to America last week. How was it?" Slightly different. But using that in the right setting is very, very clever. And when that's converted into a channel such as email, 72% of people love email. And I actually draw back to something that Guy said 5 years ago. And I think the subject was, "Is email dead?" This was so long ago, and it's still got a lot more legs. It clearly isn't. People are still using it, but it's how you do more with it and how you give that level of service through a channel that people are wary of. And we talk about ethical marketing, and we talk about not being manipulated, and we talk about the best way of using it, and Hilton do it incredibly well. And linked to that, my second favorite loyalty scheme, and I was involved with it for a number of years and built the platform, but individual restaurants who are now a customer of ours have Club Individual, which is their loyalty platform, and built within that is a huge guest database. And in the same way that Hilton do it, they use it for digital comms, but they also use it for service at the restaurant. So they will add a note that I love sea bass, or that I have 6 sugars with my tea. And I then get that used within the restaurant to give amazing service. So I think it's all about how the information is used. And if it's used in the correct way, then people are no longer wary about the information that you hold. It's all about what's done. And as I say, Hilton could give me even more information. Hilton could list every single hotel visit that I've done in the day. Wouldn't necessarily mind, as long as it gives me some form of better service and it gives me something that I'm not wary of.
And that's what it comes down to. I think it all boils down to customer service, doesn't it? So if we're actually walking into a fashion shop, and I'm looking for something in particular, I'm happy to explain to them my needs, my requirements. I'm going to a particular event. I'm sharing my data with them, because I know that they're going to use that data to help me to achieve my objective. And doing the email it's no different, as long as we are using it and we're honoring the fact that they are sharing their data. I think that's the key thing.
We're seeing incredible success as well with asking people questions. So we've got data on people, but actually let's ask them more about their visit to give better service. But the amount of information that people will give on these, which does give you some great insight into a visit history. And one of our customers, we're implementing Feed It Back. So we send them a nice email, and it collects every bit of information, and we feed quite a lot of information through. But people love to put essays in these. They want to tell you about their experience, because we're talking about them, and people love to talk about themselves. And just reading these and finding some level of some ability to try and pull some data from them gives you a massive information that people are happy to share with you, as long as there's a valid reason for it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. They have to see that valid reason coming out of the back end. Now, you've mentioned, Adam, you mentioned some examples and touched on a couple of your other clients. Lauren, can you give some examples of how this works in practice with some of your clients?
Yeah, absolutely. So a good example of a marketing campaign we recently sent out for individual restaurants this October. And the focus of the campaign was to engage the audience, but also, as Kath said, give them some value for us communicating with them. And there isn't a sales email. So the email campaign itself was to basically introduce for individual restaurants their new autumn winter menu. But basically off the back of that as well, we basically gave the audience, the customer, the person, the opportunity to win the entire value of their meal back for dining with us. So it's in using these engagement campaigns, like for individual restaurants, the one we've just sent, as a marketer and as an agency, for our clients that we're pushing and moving forward with these new approaches. And we touched on it earlier, but it's really essential, really, that the people that we're communicating with, that this value that we're adding, we want to increase the value of the lifetime customer. That's the whole point. In order to do that, we need to move away from the single track mind of the sell, and make it an ethical, long-term, tangible approach. Really, that's our aim for us anyway, especially. But it is difficult, moving a client from the historic, sell email to a fully ethical approach. It's a process to move the client and the audience through that. And it's, we're trying, obviously, all the work we're doing with Kath and Validity, trying to move them and hold the hand, if you like, through that process. But it is a process, and it's just working our way and easing them in, if you like, to that new approach.
Another good example, and it's very closely linked, but we work with another clothing brand, and I love the clothing brand myself, and they have they basically send a weekly sales email, and it's very much sell, buy this, buy that, no reason, no logic. It's just very much focused on what they offer. And we've said to them, look, let's build a story. You've got a really nice background on where you started and how the business was formed and where it started. Let's do that. So we're going to do you one sales email, and we're going to do you one email with no selling in it. The email with no selling in it has better sales than the email that's trying to sell. And people are reading it. The open rate is massively more. The click-through rate is about 4 times more. People are engaging with this email because they're interested, because the brand is trying to tell them it's trying to tell them a little bit about themselves, rather than this is why you should buy this product. Listen, we just want to tell you about us without trying to sell you anything. And people are naturally drawn to that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you also see that if I'm trying to promote a product, buy this shirt or this pair of shoes, it's sort of like trying to hit the bullseye on a dartboard. I'm going to miss more often than not, because each person may not want the shoes. They see a subject line about shoes and they're like, I can't be bothered. I don't need shoes. But they see a subject line about, here's our backstory, and that gets them into this site, and then they wander around, and then they do find something they need.
Yeah, I think, as well, part of our job and our role and where we're moving forward to this new ethical approach is evaluating the data that we do have, is looking at the purchasing, looking at, the behavior of the customer, and then the communications off the back of that we send are specific to that customer. Sending, we just, as Adam said before, the brand that we've currently started working with, we're sending an email to women that actually buy for their other half, so they're more interested in males' clothing rather than themselves. So the content that we're sending in that email is off the back of the data is specific to what they're actually after. And that's what we're seeing, aren't we, when we're looking at it? It's being smarter with it.
And it's quite interesting as well with what Skip, you mentioned, in that, do you find that you're missing the target? So strangely, our first email that we sent for this brand was around one product. So they had one really nice jacket that was their initial kind of product, and they're famous for it. So we told the story about that, and we had a link, want to buy it, here you go, here it is, but we weren't trying to sell. And strangely, people did click the link and they did buy the product, but the highest clicked link on the top of the email was just to take you to the shop. So people that wanted it bought it, and there was actually a great return on that. But the most clicked link within the email was a small thing that said men at the top. So it took you to the men's section. That was it. And that was the highest click link, because they wanted to know more, and they were reading the email. They want, I don't want the jacket, but actually I want to engage with the email. So link at the top.
Yeah, because you haven't just flogged me a jacket, but you've told me a story. I'm like, okay, let's see what else you get. What
Exactly. And you could see that. And we're talking click-through rates, and their general click-through rate was about 2.5%. It saw 8% clicks, which was massively, a massive improvement of what they've historically got, because they're not trying to sell. It's a strange way. And as Lauren said, it's very difficult when you're trying to get people into the mindset without being able to prove it. But we took a bit of a punt and said, look, trust us, and it paid off for them.
So I just to follow up on that, Adam, I saw a stat. Well, it's probably 6 months ago now, but it was something like 84% of British consumers, had tried a different brand, had tried new brands during the pandemic, during the lockdown. I can imagine that, loyalty was both really tested over the last 18 months, but also very, very important. How has the club individual program helped individual restaurants through the pandemic, and what role does loyalty play in getting a brand through any kind of crisis?
Yeah. I mean, it was so important. I'm massively close to individual restaurants. As Guy said, 20 years and grey hairs. I'm 20 years in and grey hairs as well, nearly. But during the pandemic, nobody expected it was going to happen. It happened, and people tried to react to it. So individual restaurants was a great example. And what they did was their number one focus has always been the customer and has always been the guest. So how can we as a business keep our people engaged and keep people interacting with the business? Well, I'll tell you what, we'll open up for delivery and collection, as probably everybody in hospitality at some point tried to do during the pandemic to keep things moving. But they did it in a different way. So we built an online order platform for them, but they did it whereby they would deliver the food. You would order your food and they would deliver it in their own cars by their own waiting staff. And the waiting staff would go around and they would take everything out. They would plate it for you. They would give the restaurant service. You had the general manager that was also there that knew the customer. And I remember there's an example just up the road from our office, and a guy called Ettore at Piccolino in Manchester, and he's the most lovely general manager I've ever met. But he was stood there every single day with his little table, giving his deliveries out, getting people a grappa or getting people a glass of wine, because he'd missed that interaction with his customers, and he'd missed being able to speak to them and give them something. So by him being there, giving you your collection, you've already paid for it, you know exactly what you want, but by him being there and giving you your collection and giving you a free grappa, you felt something. You felt part of the business again. And that kept people warm enough. So when the doors did open, they were busy. I think had they not have done that, as you say, Skip, people go to different brands. Had they not have done anything, people would have gone to a Gusto or a Pizza Express or whatever it may have been, a different competing brand, and then may never have come back. But the fact that they order some food for delivery, get Ettore, the crazy general manager from Manchester, taking it round with a free bottle of wine, you will never get that service anywhere else. And it just shows that, loyal members, and they still did exactly the same thing. So delivery and collection, get your club individual points. People were still getting points. People could spend their points. Nothing had changed apart from the fact that we're in a global pandemic. The managers didn't feel that they were detached from their customers. The customers didn't feel disengaged. And when everything came back to normal again, they were busy. And email was a huge part of that. And we always come back to email and validity. We've done a big project with individual restaurants and validity on inbox placement. Had we not have had that and email and the ability to push this delivery and collection, I don't think the business would have survived the pandemic. It definitely got them through the pandemic, and it meant that on the other side they were incredibly busy. But that ability to speak to people, give them what they want, to offer that amazing service, albeit digitally and slightly different, was a big part of the business. And it really was. It kept those loyal customers loyal.
It's such a cool story that a company the size of individual restaurants was, able to deliver that really local feel. I mean, I'm comparing it to, so I live in London, and I'm comparing it to my local pub, which is just one block over, and it's an independent pub. And, kind of between lockdown and before the furlough program started, they had every night was a different night, right? So it might be pie night, or it might be bangers and mash night. And so you had to get your order in by 1:32 in the afternoon, or they were out.
Yeah.
But then they also opened up in the mornings as a greengrocer. So they took in all the supplies that they normally took in, and then laid them out on the pub tables, and you went in and they effectively reopened as a store. Yeah. And it was great. Everybody loved it. And then of course when the furlough came, the economics of it were, well, furlough is safer for the staff, so we'll do that. Fair enough. But I love those stories of, the crazy manager, let's not say crazy, let's just say charismatic. The charismatic manager,
Better word,
yeah, I can see him standing outside the door with a napkin over his arm and a bag of food.
But I think we all learned during the pandemic, didn't we? Nobody really knew how to be a customer that only ever had a takeaway. Nobody really knew that you had to go into a venue and order on a phone. People have learned an awful lot on how to deal with people and how to work with businesses, and things have changed. But I just think that adaptation, that process of change, was actually quite interesting to see. And we mentioned Ettore, the manager, and love him, he's amazing, but he didn't know what he was doing at the beginning of it. He just knew he had to serve his customers. But his natural instinct kicked in, which is, I need to look after these people. I'm going to give them a grappa on the street corner. And you could see it. He had 4 or 5 people stood there waiting. They got their takeaways in their hand, but they were literally waiting, having a chat just to catch up with him, because they hadn't done for 6 months or whatever it was. And it gave them the ability to do what they do best. And it was lovely to see.
But I think, it also gives us a great illustration of how loyalty actually works both ways. Both the examples that you gave, same where I live. Our village pub had to scramble to survive. And I think, everyone in the village was very appreciative of the efforts that they were making, but also went out of their way to support them, because we knew we had to support them. And if we didn't, they weren't going to pull through. And when the pandemic was finished, we wouldn't have a pub anymore. So, that loyalty went in both directions. And I think, that's germane to today's conversation too.
Yeah, very much so.
So, Guy, I do want to get, actually, Adam mentioned a case study, and I do want to get to that because it's a cool case study. But let's take a step back for a second. I'm assuming loyalty is not just measured by spend, right? But loyalty, to some degree, going back to Lauren's point, if all we're doing is sell, then loyalty would only be measured by spend, and that can't be right. So it must be measured also by overall engagement, or at least that plays a role. And frankly, the pink elephant in the room, you can't really have a session on email at the moment without mentioning Apple's mail privacy protection features. Notice I called them features, as released in iOS 15. So for those who have not heard, clearly had way better things to talk about over the last few months. One of Apple's goals with these new features is to make open tracking unreliable, and therefore pretty much not usable for the average marketer. Open rate's a metric that, it's really important for a lot of brands. And when that metric goes away, a lot of brands are kind of casting about going, ooh, what do I do? Guy, what's going to replace it as the leading signal of engagement as it relates to loyalty?
I think there's so many strands to the answer to that question that we could spend the rest of the day talking about it, I think. But from programs that we've been speaking to, I think the obvious one is that there is going to be a shift towards greater use of the click metric, sort of next metric downstream from open, perhaps more accurate because of the way that it's generated anyway. The downside being that, that metric is generated in smaller quantities than opens are. So, some of the impact for senders is thinking about things like split testing, for example, and if you've got a program of sufficient size, you could probably run an A/B split test where version A receives, 5% receives version A, 5% receives version B, 90% receives the winner. But if you want that same level of confidence based on clicks, you might have to go for 10, 10, and 80, or 20, 20, and 60, to have the same level of confidence. So, accurate, but smaller sample size. I think, we're starting to see shifts towards other metrics, for us at Validity and the deliverability space. We are seeing greater focus on things like sender reputation and inbox placement. And the reason is that to an extent, they are proxy for email engagement. If you think about it, engagement's an important part of sender reputation. If your sender reputation's tracking up, it's probably a fairly good indicator that your recipients are engaging with your emails and vice versa. But I think something that Adam and Lauren said a few minutes ago was really interesting, because there's also been a lot of talk in the industry about open rate as a metric is going to be degraded. That's a problem because it's a really great way of measuring subscriber engagement. How else do we measure subscriber engagement? And I think part of the thinking is, well, it's not just a question of measuring it. Perhaps the bigger picture is how do you go about trying to bake more engagement into your program right at the start? When your new subscribers join the program, when they sign up for you for the first time. And there's a lot of talk about zero-party data, and which is basically saying, what, instead of inferring sort of needs and interests and behaviors, ask for it and then act on it. And there's probably been quite a lot of pushback in a lot of the sort of industry conversations we've seen going, nice idea, but if you've got to ask for it, nobody's ever going to give it to you. It's going to fall at the first hurdle. And yet, from Adam and Lauren, maybe 10 minutes ago, we heard just the opposite. Ask for it, and providing you can state a good reason for asking for it and, strike a clear, sort of value balance, if you will, in terms of how it's going to be used and what you're going to get in return. And the answer may well be, yeah, absolutely. What else can we tell you about ourselves? So I found that really, really interesting. Zero-party data as an expression, it's massively overused. It's it's the next big buzzword, like big data was a couple of years ago. But
not only is it overused, it's grammatically wrong. But I won't get into that again.
Because it should be first party, but that again would be another webinar that'll last the whole afternoon. But I think, sort of winding back to the point, because I've taken a little while to make it, I think, it may well be a more effective solution than a lot of people are giving it credit for, especially if, based on what we just heard from Adam and Lauren, holds true for other programs.
I think there's the old phrase that people just like talking about themselves. And I think one thing that we've also proven with that, and it's probably mildly off topic, but if you look at things like TripAdvisor, everybody puts something on TripAdvisor and reads TripAdvisor, and I generally take it with a pinch of salt because I know that somebody will probably write on TripAdvisor if they've had a bad experience. Or they're more likely to be driven to it. But if I'm going to get an email that looks nice that says, we really want to know what you thought of this experience, will you share this information with us? I'd love to. And as long as it came the day after the visit, as long as it was topical, as long as it reminded me where I went and when I went, and we even put the time and the date and everything in there, which it's Big Brother. It could scare some people, but actually we want to know about your experience. We need this information. Everybody is relaxed with it. And we're talking thousands of people that fill this information in.
Yeah, it's interesting. I started my career in the theme park business way before there was, even the internet, frankly. And, we used to have this rule of thumb that if a guest had a great day, they'd tell 5 people. And if they had a rubbish day, they'd tell 25 people. Mm-hmm. And I think, you just hit that nail square on the head, except now it's not 5 and 25. It's, how many people are reading those reviews, right? It's 500,000 and 250 million. Or whatever. Yeah. I want to pick up on kind of Guy's point around zero-party data, because we've had a question in from Steph and Elliot, who's a friend of all of ours, I think. Hey, Steph, glad that you can see us. We can't see you, obviously. But it's touching on, zero-party data is go out and ask. Go out and ask for the information that you want. How much should we, and are, as this question is for Lauren and Adam, as email marketers, how willing are you or how able are you to really explain what some of the other data that you're capturing and using it, as consumers become more savvy with the data, how the internet works and how tracking data works, are we going to have to become a lot more transparent with, yes, we track a click, and we use that click to, decide on what the next thing is. Or the example that Steph used is, yes, we're going to hash your email address and we're going to share that to get to with a third party so that we can increase our profile on you, increase what we know about you. Where does that, I guess, cross that ethical line is my question. And I'm throwing that out to the table.
I'll jump in because I think it's something that's been on my mind. And I think a simplistic definition, but one which would probably all understand, is simply, not to use people's data in a way that they wouldn't expect is ethical marketing. I think at various stages of our career, we've talked about don't be creepy, don't be perceived as sort of stalking people around the web. And I don't think it's necessarily that you've got to go into like a long technical explanation of how you use the data. I think, a typical consumer probably sort of, figures out at a sort of fairly high level, how you supply data at point A and then you get served an ad at point B, for example. But I think to do it ethically, as I say, is to make sure that you don't do it in ways that they don't expect. It's like we talked about the DMA research, and one of the questions which gets asked every year is, how often do you sit there scratching your head thinking, I wonder how they got my email address? And, some of it is just because people have forgotten they signed up. But even so, if that's the case, should you be taking some steps to remind them? And it's like, oh yeah, that's right, I bought something from you sort of last July. Because if you don't, that sort of transparency and that sort of operating in accordance with the way they expect isn't there. And maybe even sort of coming back to MPP, it's easy in hindsight, but perhaps if email senders had been as a cohort more transparent, and that as part of every sign-up process, there's a statement just like your permissioning statement that says, be aware we use pixel tracking, and we try to use it responsibly to sort of see whether you like what we're sending you, and sort of pivot on your frequency if you don't. You might never have got to a point where Apple deemed that it was necessary to introduce MPP in the first place.
Yeah, that's a great point. So building off that, Kath, going back to kind of zero-party data and being totally open and transparent with what you're collecting and how you're using it, how is this changing, this approach, changing the work that you do with, the Loyalty Co. and other clients as well?
So I've always been, the whole new label of it's a bit frustrating because we just call it informed data, because the customer has informed you with that data, right? And it can work a treat, but it's also you have to understand, and I think this is one of the things, there's always a balance to be achieved, right? So when you're asking, for information from a customer in order to help them in their experience, whether it be in a survey or you're explicitly asking them about, their preferences or so on, you have to take a little bit with a grain of salt as well, because we as humans tend to answer things as our ideal self. So it's not always going to be factual or true, okay? And whereas the actual actions are truth. In fact, that's it. And we've just been working with a client recently. This isn't individual restaurants, but another client that I'm working with. And we kind of put them both to the test because they've got a nice preference center, and then they've also got the behavioral data. So the informed data and the behavioral data. And, both with this, both based on the same categories. And the behavioral data actually won, because it's based upon what they have actually previously purchased in the past. Now, that's not to say that, okay, that's it, it trumps over forever. No, it's a matter of understanding and using both. And so when it comes to individual restaurants, so what Holistic did was we did an audit, and then we put together a strategy, and that strategy is now being implemented, and it is using both types of data. It is, and it's everything about the strategy is based upon the customer. Now, the beauty about this, and if anyone's ever heard me speak before, you're going to roll your eyes because you're going to, yeah, right? But the beauty about this is that it's not like we're ignoring individual restaurants' needs, objectives, or anything like that. We understand they're there to make money. That's what it's all about, right? We need to make money in order for the restaurants to exist, to be able to pay staff and all the rest of it. But if we can focus on the customer, by using and dealing and delving into and delivering based upon both these different types of data, then what we can do is we're helping the customer to achieve what they want from actually being subscribed or to being a customer of individual restaurants, which is going to see them coming back time and time and time again, increasing customer lifetime value. And it's a very long way of actually just saying this kind of data, when used correctly and when used with the basic premise of how can we use this data to help the customer, it helps, it wins. And that's what we're currently doing.
Yeah,
that's a great example. I worked with a wine client years ago, and one of the things when they started looking at data that, purchase data and behavioral data versus explicit data, and they started to get some disconnects. One of the things their CMO did was he banned the question why. You weren't allowed to ask why, because what he found was his marketing team was spending so much time digging into why did the customer do that, and not just reacting to they did it.
Yeah.
Market to them. Yeah, like, come on, why is not important in this situation. I think that's so clear that you answer a question either based on your ideal self or how that you perceive the person you're talking to, what they want to hear.
Yeah, we had a recent example that was very closely linked, but the retail brand again. We're going to segment. We're going to send a different email to ladies as we do for gents. And what we actually did quite quickly when we looked at the analysis was we realized that the people that we were about to send an email to with ladies' clothes on actually didn't buy ladies' clothes. They bought men's clothes. So we were sending it to ladies who were buying for men. So it comes down to this. Don't ask why, look at the information, maybe just kind of adapt the information. And, first week we could have sent a nice gender split, made it more personalized for who it was going to. But actually then when you dig further down, just look at the information and the data that and see what it's showing you, because actually we could have done something completely wrong.
Yeah, that's a brilliant point. And a great way to kind of a nice segue, Adam, in terms of, so Kath talked about, how the change in the data we collect and the zero-party data has changed how she works with her clients or how Holistic works with their clients. What are your views? What are you seeing from a brand perspective? What kind of things have you had to change or adapt to in order to make this work for you?
We've probably had to, in a way, we've had to try and get information from other sources. So we bring a good example into what we've done recently for individual restaurants in terms of using information that we can gain from people. So we mentioned Apple, we mentioned sort of receiving information, but we want to, a good example, we had a problem where we were trying to understand who wanted to interact with a campaign. The easiest way historically is click here, or look who's opened it, look who's clicked the campaign, and we get a picture of what the people are trying to do. With all of the recent changes, we've now changed tact, and this was for individual restaurants, but we now push out to the app. So they've got a mobile app where we can get a lot more analytics and a lot more information from users that are within the app. So we push from the email to the app and then use that to start building a picture of behavioral data and what that customer wants to interact with. So we kind of using email as the main channel, but for actually giving us more insight and more information, we're pushing them to something that we have more control over to be able to facilitate that. And that's one thing that we're seeing both with ourselves. A lot of people are seeing it's about how do we still get the same level of information that we used to, but by being a bit more clever.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I like that notion of driving people to a channel that you have more control over and it can actually make more engaging. I mean, let's face it. I mean, both Adam, you and Guy have talked about hair, which I've been cool about. I haven't mentioned it, but I'm just saying. But at the end of the day, email technology is older than, well, I think I'm the oldest person on this call, so it's older than all of us, and it's not terribly interactive. Kath, I was being nice.
Up to that, Kath.
Yeah, it's not the most interactive channel. It's not the most engaging I mean, it's a very engaging channel, but you, as you say, you don't have a lot of control.
It's not interactive, I suppose. It's not necessarily, or it's become increasingly difficult to be two-way. So I suppose everything that we're now trying to do, and we mentioned it with getting information on Feed It Back or whatever it may be, we're trying to get that two-way channel of communication, not just because people enjoy it and it actually brings better engagement, but also it gives us more richer information that we can use going forward.
Yeah, that's cool. Now, Guy, Adam touched on something there that is, I know, in your wheelhouse, but is kind of the bane of email marketers' existence. This is all well and good, but if the email's not getting in the inbox, going back to the control topic, all this good work, all the good segmentation, all the content you've created that relates to that segmentation, all that has been for nothing.
Yeah, I think that's right. And, I'll make a general comment, because every month we pull a set of data at Validity just looking at global email activity. So volume, deliverability, open and click rates. And I think it's amazing because, we've talked about how email's a popular channel, and it really came into its own across the pandemic, especially as there was such a massive shift towards e-commerce while so many people were locked down. And I think there was a question mark in terms of, as normality started to resume, would it head back to, sort of a previous level? But there's no indication at all. It really does look like, these higher levels of activity are truly the new norm. And even sort of looking at our latest data, sort of global permission-based email volume right now is already higher than it was for last year's Black Friday, Cyber Monday period, which is traditionally the annual peak. So, as a sense of scale. And, the reason I sort of share that is, the challenge, of course, is that global deliverability gets harder because of that. And, it's not a problem that sort of individual programs have, although they do, but also as an industry, because, make no mistake, even the Gmails and the Microsofts of the world have finite resources. They've got finite servers, they've got finite bandwidth, and when they're dealing with this tidal wave of email volume, even they've got to make some decisions in terms of which emails do they accept, which ones do they accept first, which ones do they throttle. And that comes back to established principles like sender reputation. And if you look like a good sender, they're going to handle you more favorably than if you look like a bad sender. And so that's critical for every program, and then perhaps more critical for some than others. And I think somewhere where we and Adam and his team have focused especially is that the marketing element and the sort of loyalty messaging element is important. But another key part of what a lot of Adam's traffic does is transactional. It's people making restaurant bookings, for example. And you think about your own experience. If you book a restaurant, you want that confirmation email in your inbox in a couple of seconds. Otherwise, in your mind, you're already scratching your head thinking, did it work or not? Has my booking gone through or not? Yeah. And so there, deliverability becomes absolutely critical, because only 100% is good enough. And the moment, it's perceived, rightly or wrongly, that transaction has failed, it creates other overheads for the business, because if they haven't received their confirmation email, next thing they're going to do is get on the phone, and then it's time, for the service center or the restaurant manager or whoever it is to, look up the booking and confirm it's been made. So, it's important in so many different ways. And I think a lot of the work which Validity has done together with Loyalty Co. over the last few years, has been to solve for that. It's not only that you want to achieve higher deliverability, it's that you've got to achieve top drawer deliverability. And I think, we're very proud that, for the various programs that Adam and Lauren are responsible for, they are getting as close to 100% inbox placement, not just bounce metric, inbox placement. They are delivering, and they're delivering to recipients' inboxes. And I think, that's important, because, with all of those deliverability challenges that I've described, you've got to be the best. You know, only being the best is good enough, because even when you do get delivered, then there's like a huge amount of noise in terms of congested inboxes and who gets, you know, who wins iShare, who wins share of mind, who wins share of wallet. And I think as we've worked together over the years, you know, we've understood that. You know, I talk about it at a technical level, and I quote inbox placement rates, but I think, you know, Adam and Lauren have the helicopter view. You know, they know the positive impact this has, you know, for the businesses that we're working with.
Yeah, it's even more it's even more of a problem now, Guy, if those emails aren't getting through, because I think everybody knows the hospitality sector, and, you know, I'm massively close to it, but there's a huge problem with staff shortages. There's a huge problem with labor. There's businesses that during the pandemic couldn't afford to put more staff on, or physically didn't have the staff. So that phone call to say, I've not received my booking confirmation, became more of a problem than it's ever been. As well as, you know, from our point of view, we obviously deal with the transactional, but we've also got customers on certification, and that's for their, you know, their bulk mail. But also, that's so important, because actually, if you can't communicate to people to say that you're doing delivery and collection and you're open, certainly individual restaurants, this was so important, then you're potentially missing out from what might make or break the business and keep you open.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, you know, maybe it's because I'm an email marketer, but nothing makes me lose trust in a brand more than when, you know, they say, oh, you'll get a confirmation email.
Yeah.
If you don't get it, check your spam folder.
Yeah.
Because then I start thinking, well, what other junk are you sending? Right? You know, how slapdash are you? I mean, I guess probably a great way to wrap up is to expand on that a little bit, Adam. So, you know, you mentioned the case study earlier. I read the case study. It's a great case study. Just kind of walk us through, if you can, in the last couple of seconds that we have, you know, the knock-on effects, the positive knock-on effects of improving inbox placement. And I'll stick a link to that case study in the chat.
Absolutely. It's definitely just around engagement. As you say, you trust the brand more. And this whole conversation piece was really around trust. As you say, if it says check your spam folder, you don't trust the brand instantly. If you don't receive your email confirmation, you don't necessarily trust the brand. If all of your emails go into a junk folder, if they're the bulk emails, you don't trust the brand, because email providers these days are making it harder to try and get from the spam folder to the inbox folder, and making it appear that you're an even worse sender if you're in the spam folder. You know, are you sure you want to move this from your spam folder to your inbox? We don't, you know, almost like they don't want you to. So if you get it into that spam folder, you've got no chance. And we look at it, as we said before, from two different streams. We look at it from our TLC and transactional emails that we certify ourselves as a sort of added value for our customers. So we don't pass on that cost. We do it as part of a wider program for our transactional emails, as well as for some customers that use the full certification, so individual restaurants being one of them. It is so important because, as Guy said, these, you know, Hotmail, Gmail have limited resource. So if you're going to get into the spam folder at some point, they're just not going to allow your emails in, because they've only got a certain amount of space, they've only got a certain amount of bandwidth, servers. So by being a good sender, you're able to move with the times, because it's becoming harder to get into an inbox if you're a poor sender, from a transactional point of view and a bulk point of view. And we've worked with Validity on both, and it's been amazing. Cool.
Well, you know what? This has been a brilliant conversation, but we're at the top of the hour, and unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. Which, well, I'm disappointed. I was really enjoying that. I don't want it to end. All right. So please let us know what you thought. Give us some feedback in the chat. And join me in giving a big thanks to Guy, Adam, Lauren, and Kath for providing their invaluable insights and just really engaging conversation. That was really good fun. I personally really enjoyed that. Also, of course, thanks to Validity. A tremendous thank you to them for sponsoring today's chat, and to Holistic Email Marketing for offering today's prize draw, which is one Kindle version of Kath's award-winning and best-selling book, Holistic Email Marketing, A Practical Philosophy to Revolutionize Your Business and Delight Your Customers. And I got to tell you, this book does not sit here on the edge of my desk because I'm doing this presentation. It is here all the time. It's an invaluable resource. I guess the last thing to say really is thank you. Thank you for spending your afternoon with us. You know, I know that time is tight and you've got other things to be doing. So the fact that you were able to carve out an hour to spend with us really means a lot to all the speakers. So thank you. I'm sure we'll see each other soon. But until then, be safe and make good choices.
Great. Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Guys, goodbye.